reward. Whether you say a thing secretly or openly, he knows your innermost thoughts.
Let me translate this for you. If you keep quiet out of fear, you will be rewarded with a reprieve from punishment. But be careful of what you think and say, because I'm watching you. The following verses vainly try to establish a sense of legitimate authority for the wrathful tormentor, presenting the perpetrator as gracious.
Quran 67, verse 14. It is he who made the earth subservient to you, that you may travel and eat the things he provided.
Be nice, and you won't be chained, burned, or have to eat trash. But if you squeal,
to him you shall return. Are you so unafraid that he will not open the earth to swallow you, pelt you with showers of stones, or let loose on you a violent wind, so that you shall know how terrible my warning is? But indeed, men before them rejected my warning. They denied. So then, how terrible will be my punishment of them, and my wrath.
It's an old and perverted story. Victimization is the victim's fault because he or she ignored the obvious signs of the tormentor's authority and justification. You may think that I'm making too much of a single surah, but this surah does not stand alone. Pain and punishment for those who do not acquiesce to the authority of the perpetrator is the Quran's single most dominant theme, with 1,000 iterations. Being burned alive is the most common form of torment. We're even told that men's bodies, their flesh, fuel the fire. We also have another poignant clue in this passage, a Freudian slip. Muhammad begins by referring to God as He, establishing his Lord's power, control, and justification. Then he transitions to my, as he says, my warning they denied. So then how terrible will be my rejection of them and my wrath. And all of this, unlike most of the Quran, is in the singular, he and my, not the usual plural, we and our. That's because this is personal with Muhammad. We are looking directly into the heart of Islam's founder. Roasting men alive is not the only method of punishment deployed in the Quran, yet each and every variation is consistent with what the Prophet might have endured around a Bedouin campfire. The other ghoulish treatments include being forced to drink scalding water, being made to eat thorns, choking down boiling pitch. Clothes are set on fire. Men are shackled with twine and then turned on a spit. And while I cannot prove that our orphan was abused as a child, all the evidence points in that direction. It explains why the Quran is so filled with threats of pain and punishment. It explains the nature of the torments. It explains the underlying reason for them. And it explains why the Prophet was so angry at Uncle Abu Lahab. By not adopting him, Lahab was ultimately responsible for the anguish Muhammad endured. It even explains the motivation for Islam. Lahab controlled the religious scam Muhammad coveted. He had what his nephew craved, power and wealth. They would have provided relief. Since the Quran was too poorly written, too foolish, too contradictory, and too twisted to be divinely inspired, there must have been an ulterior motive behind such haunting words. If not abuse, then what? Thus far, Islam has been as transparent as a cloudless desert sky. Let's take a quick inventory. At Khadijah's urging, Muhammad usurped the authority of an unnamed lord to stake his claim to the wealth that flowed from the family's religious scam. A hellish childhood created a hellish religion that looked suspiciously similar to what the Prophet may have personally endured. Heaven was created in his image as well, depicted as the lustful realm an abandoned boy would have desired, a realm where the women who rejected him were used to bring him pleasure. God's character and words came to reflect the Prophet's wishes. The remainder of the 67th Surah simply wallows in puddles of delusion and despair.
Verse 19. Do they not observe the birds above them, spreading their wings and folding them in? Nothing holds them aloft except Ar-Rahman. Truly Ar-Rahman watches over all things.
Flight happens because Ar-Rahman holds birds aloft. It's clear Muhammad never went to physics class. Bernoulli's principle, the law that explains aerodynamic lift, was way too complex. And make no mistake, this is offered as a proof of Ar-Rahman's existence, not as a metaphor. Yet for a God so into holding birds aloft, he sure wasn't much help on the morning of 9/11, 2001. Perhaps our Rockman was distracted by burning infidels. No, that's not right. Knowing Muhammad's Lord as we do, his spirit let go of the united and American birds, so that he could watch thousands of infidels burn. Allahu Akbar. With the Lord's divine authority firmly established, we return to
the kingdom.
Surah.
Quran 67, verse 20. Who is he that will send an army to assist you beside our Rahman? The unbelievers are lost in delusion.
Another motivation, another teaching is revealed. Our Rahman is a militaristic god. With an army, jihad would soon become Islam's most recognizable attribute, the means the messenger would use to abuse his adversaries. As we discovered earlier, our Rahman was a pagan rock idol with a house like Allah's. The two gods vied for attention, and it's clear that Allah was slighted in the early going. Not only hasn't he been mentioned thus far, he wouldn't find his way into Islam for quite some time. It's not a very nice way to treat the Lord of the house. So why choose this name? Muslim scholars have no viable explanation as to why Muhammad called his Lord our Rahman. The best they can do is to say that God has many names and that our Rahman became one of their God's attributes. But that's nonsense. Our Rahman was the name of a pagan deity, one much better known, at least outside of the tiny village of Mecca, than was Allah. He was an idol, not an attribute. Further, all of the initial religiosity contained in the early revelations mirrors the religion of the Hanifs, the followers of our Rahman. There are serious problems associated with the prophet choosing to name his spirit our Rahman. When Muhammad ultimately migrated from the shallow doctrinal pools of the Hanifs to the unimaginably deep reservoir of the Jews, he was forced to claim that his Lord was their Lord, the biblical God, Yahweh. Otherwise, why were all of these characters and stories so similar? But that was problematic. Although Muhammad didn't know it, the God of the Bible had a name, Yahweh. He didn't know it because the Jews were afraid to say it for fear of blasphemy. And since he was illiterate, Muhammad couldn't read any of the 7,000 times Yahweh was written in their scriptures. Just like our Bible translations today, when the Hebrew word says Yahweh, God's personal name, we read and say the Lord. But Joe is not Jim, Moses is not Muhammad, and Yahweh is neither our Rahman nor Allah. As in politics, a blunder becomes a crisis when it is covered up and then exposed. The Islamic clerics, following their God's lead, have tried to sweep the name of the Quran's first God under the rug. So we must ask, if there's nothing to hide, why try so hard to hide it? Of the many Quran translations, all but two errantly replace our Rahman's name with an attribute like merciful, the title Lord, the generic God, or with the name Allah. But unlike the Jews who misinterpreted the third commandment, there is no excuse for changing our Rahman to Lord, God, or Allah. This problem is exacerbated by the invocation that was later added before each surah. In their desire to make our Rahman into Allah, and to make both appear good, in spite of their scriptures, this line is repeated 113 times.
In the name of Allah the Benevolent, Ar-Rahmin, the Merciful, Ar-Rahman.
So desperate are Islamic scholars to present their hateful, punitive, and warlike spirit in a favorable light, one even wrote a book proclaiming merciful and benevolent are the Quran's most repeated attributes for Allah. Holy hogwash! The salutation wasn't part of the Quranic revelation. For those who may be curious, I'll digress for a moment. The third commandment does not say, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Not only is it beneath Yahweh to write such a trivial thing in stone, his name isn't the Lord. A name can't be taken, and vain either means egotistical as it relates to a person, or failed as it relates to an endeavor. In that the line was meaningless, Jews and later Christians falsely assumed that our Creator was telling us that we shouldn't swear or say Yahweh. The commandment as it's written in Hebrew says something that is vital to our very survival. You shall not accept or advance in the name or character of Yahweh, your deity, anything that is deceptive or destructive. Our failure to understand this commandment and live by it